Eric Marlowe's radiation counter crackled to life, its warning tone piercing through the howl of the desert wind. He cursed, adjusting the atmospheric filter on his mask as crimson sand pelted against his protective gear. The readout on his augmented vision display showed radiation levels climbing into the red zone. Again. "Just my luck," he muttered, ducking behind a half-buried chunk of ancient concrete. The ruins of what had once been a thriving city stretched before him, most structures now little more than weathered stumps jutting from the radioactive dunes. Overhead, the sky bore its usual sickly purple hue, a constant reminder of humanity's desperate situation. His wrist computer chirped, displaying an incoming message from the Settlement Council. Alert. All citizens return to designated safe zones. Class 3 storm approaching. Eric ignored it, like he ignored most official warnings. The real treasures were always found in the places they told you not to go. He pulled out his scanner, a cobbled-together piece of off-world tech he'd traded 3 months of water rations for. Its holographic display flickered to life, revealing unusual energy signatures beneath the sand. "Come on, old girl, don't fail me now." He tapped the device's casing, trying to get a clearer reading. The signal was unlike anything he'd seen before, not the usual radiation patterns or buried text signatures he typically encountered. A violent gust of wind nearly knocked him off his feet. The storm was intensifying, the sand now taking on an otherworldly violet glow. Eric's mask filters strained against the onslaught, but he pressed forward, following the scanner's guidance. Each step sank ankle-deep into the shifting ground. The energy signature grew stronger, pulsing in a rhythm that seemed to match his heartbeat. Eric's skin tingled with an inexplicable electricity. 20 meters ahead, something glinted through the swirling sand. He activated his plasma torch, burning away layers of compacted sand. The object beneath began to take shape, smooth, dark metal unlike anything manufactured on Earth or by the off-world colonies. Chains of an impossible material crisscrossed its surface, each link inscribed with symbols that seemed to shift and move when he tried to focus on them. "Holy shit," Eric breathed, his fingers hovering over the glyphs. They emitted a faint blue luminescence, pulsing in time with the scanner's readings. This is definitely not human tech. His hand moved closer, drawn by an instinct he couldn't explain. The moment his fingers made contact with the symbols, energy surged through his body. The glyphs flared brilliant blue, and the chains began to disintegrate like smoke in the wind. "No, no, no!" Eric scrambled backward as the structure, now clearly a sarcophagus, began to open with a hydraulic hiss. His heart pounded against his ribs as pale blue light spilled from within. A woman lay inside, but she was like no human he'd ever seen. Her skin was a deep, shimmering blue that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. Dark hair framed a face of otherworldly beauty, and when her eyes snapped open, Eric found himself staring into what looked like miniature galaxies swirling in their depths. Her lips parted, and in perfect English, she whispered, "Time has expired." Then her eyes rolled back and she collapsed forward. Eric caught her automatically, his mind reeling from the impossibility of what was happening. She felt real enough in his arms, warm and solid despite her alien appearance. Her skin had a silken texture that made his hazard suit feel coarse in comparison. The storm howled around them with renewed fury. Eric's radiation counter was screaming now, and he knew they couldn't stay exposed. Whether this woman was alien, hallucination, or something else entirely, he couldn't leave her to die in the waste. He hoisted her into his arms, surprised by how light she felt despite her height. "Don't worry," he said, though she couldn't hear him. "I know somewhere safe." As he trudged through the violet sandstorm toward his hidden bunker, Eric couldn't shake the feeling that everything he thought he knew about Earth's history was about to change. The woman in his arms was proof that humanity's origins were far stranger and possibly far darker than anyone had imagined. Eric's bunker lay hidden beneath the ruins of what had once been a pre-collapse research facility. He shifted the mysterious woman's weight to punch in his security code, then descended the reinforced stairs as emergency lights flickered to life. "Home, sweet home," he muttered, laying her gently on his makeshift medical cot. Up close, without the storm's interference, her otherworldly beauty was even more striking. Her skin seemed to ripple with subtle patterns like sunlight through deep water. His medical scanner whirred to life and Eric frowned at the readings. That can't be right. According to the device, her cellular structure was unlike anything in its database. Her DNA, if it could be called that, appeared to be writing and rewriting itself in real time. The woman stirred, her galaxy eyes fluttering open. She sat up with impossible grace, taking in her surroundings with an expression that shifted from confusion to understanding to something like pity. "You're human," she said, her voice carrying an accent he couldn't place, musical and ancient at the same time. Eric took an involuntary step back. "And you're not." A smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Observant. I am Alarian of the Kaltaria." She stood, and Eric noticed she moved as if the Earth's gravity barely affected her. "Though I suspect that means nothing to you. Should it?" "It should. It's the truth of your origins, after all." She ran a finger along his cluttered workbench, examining the salvaged tech with what looked like amusement. "Tell me, what do your histories say about humanity's beginnings?" Eric crossed his arms, studying her. "We evolved here. Before the collapse, we had cities, technology." "Lies," she interrupted, turning to face him. "Comfortable lies told to prisoners' children." Her eyes softened. "Earth was never your cradle, Eric Marlowe. It was your cage. How do you know my name?" "The same way I know you possess pure code. I can read it in your cellular structure. It's why you could activate my sarcophagus." She stepped closer, and Eric forced himself not to retreat. "Humanity didn't evolve on Earth. You were exiled here, descendants of criminals cast out from Kaltaria millennia ago." Eric laughed, but it sounded hollow even to his ears. "That's impossible. We have fossil records, evolutionary evidence, all carefully constructed to maintain the illusion." Alarian's expression darkened. "I should know. I helped design the containment protocols before." She trailed off, pain flashing across her features. "Before what?" "Before I was sentenced to temporal stasis for trying to tell the truth." She met his gaze. "The same truth I'm telling you now, though it seems I'm rather late. Your world appears to have nearly destroyed itself without any help from its makers." Eric's mind raced, connecting dots he'd never seen before. The strange artifacts that didn't fit known history, the gaps in humanity's technological development, the inexplicable ruins found in the deepest excavations, bearing symbols like those on her sarcophagus. "If what you're saying is true," he said slowly, "then why tell me now? Why were you really imprisoned?" Alarian's skin rippled with patterns of darker blue stress or emotion, he guessed. "Because my awakening has triggered something that cannot be stopped, a failsafe built into Earth's prison systems." She closed her eyes. "We have 72 hours before this planet is sealed off from the rest of the universe forever." The bunker's lights flickered, and Eric's equipment suddenly came alive with warnings. Above them, the storm's howl took on a different tone, less natural, more mechanical. "They're coming," Alarian whispered, fear evident in her voice for the first time. "The executioner. He'll have felt my awakening." "Who's coming? What executioner?" She grabbed his arm, her touch sending electric tingles through his skin. "There's no time. If you want to save your world and learn the true extent of what you are, you need to trust me. Now." The bunker security system wailed in proximity alert. Something was descending through the storm above them. Well? Alarian's galaxy's eyes bore into his. What's it going to be, Eric Marlowe? For a split second, Eric was paralyzed by the weight of the choice before him. Then the ceiling shook with an impact that rained dust down on them, and instinct took over. This way. He grabbed Alarian's hand and pulled her toward the back of the bunker. His fingers found the hidden panel, revealing a narrow escape tunnel he'd hoped never to use. It leads to an old metro station. We can lose them in the underground network. They sprinted down the tunnel as the sounds of destruction echoed behind them. Eric's helmet lights illuminated their path, casting sharp shadows on the curved walls. Alarian moved with inhuman speed and grace, barely seeming to touch the ground. Your pursuer, Eric managed between breaths. What exactly are we dealing with? Verton, she replied, her voice tight. He was once a general of Calteria's temporal forces. Now he's their most ruthless executioner. Her skin pulsed with darker patterns. And he has a very personal reason to hate me. A mechanical screech pierced the tunnel, followed by the whir of anti-gravity units. Eric's scanner showed multiple signatures gaining on them. Chronosphere drones, Alarian explained. They'll try to trap us in a time bubble. A what? Instead of answering, she pulled him into an alcove just as something whizzed past, a sphere of distorted space that made his vision blur. The wall it hit aged centuries in seconds, crumbling to dust. Okay, time bubble's bad. Got it. Eric pulled up his mental map of the underground. This way. There's a maintenance shaft that... The tunnel ahead exploded in a shower of concrete and metal. Through the dust stepped a figure that made Eric's blood run cold. It wore armor that seemed to bend light around it, its helmet a smooth, featureless oval. When it spoke, its voice resonated at frequencies that made Eric's teeth ache. Timekeeper, Ilarion, it said. Your sentence was eternal stasis. The penalty for escape is termination. Ilarion stepped forward, placing herself between Eric and the armored figure. Your anger blinds you, Verton. What happened to your family was your doing. The executioner's armor pulsed with red energy. And now you've corrupted another with your lies. This human bears pure code contamination from contact with you. The pure code was always there, Ilarion shot back. That's what you never understood. These aren't just prisoners. They're evolving, becoming something new. Eric's head spun with questions, but survival took priority. While they talked, he'd been examining the tunnel walls with his scanner. There, a weak point where old power conduits intersected. Something new? Verton laughed, the sound like breaking glass. They're destroying themselves just as we knew they would. Look at what they've done to this world. Yet we survive, Eric said, earning a startled look from both aliens. He edged closer to the wall, fingers finding his plasma torch. Maybe that's what really scares you. Verton raised his arm, weapon ports opening across his armor. You know nothing of fear, human, but you will. Actually, Eric said, igniting his torch, I know plenty about structural weaknesses in old tunnels. He plunged the plasma beam into the power conduit. The reaction was instant, a cascade of explosions that brought down tons of debris between them and Verton. Eric grabbed Ilarion and ran, the tunnel collapsing behind them. They emerged into a vast underground chamber, an ancient metro station reclaimed by time and radiation. Emergency lights still functioned in patches, casting eerie shadows across abandoned platforms and derailed mag trains. That won't hold him long, Ilarion said, scanning their surroundings. And we've just made him angrier. Then maybe it's time you told me what's really going on. Eric turned to face her. What's pure code? Why was I able to activate your sarcophagus? And what really happened between you and him? Ilarian's galaxy eyes seemed to swirl faster as she met his gaze. In the dim light, her blue skin gleamed like polished sapphire. "The truth," she said softly, "is going to change everything you think you know about yourself and humanity's place in the universe." Behind them, a distant explosion signaled that Verton was already breaking through. They had minutes at most. "Then you better talk fast," Eric said, checking his weapons, "because right now, the universe seems pretty intent on killing us." Ilarian paced the platform's edge, her movements fluid despite the urgency. "The pure code isn't just genetic material. It's a key, a master program woven into the DNA of certain humans during the exile. Why? Insurance. A way to ensure that if something went wrong with Earth's prison systems, there would be beings capable of interfacing with our technology." She stopped, facing him. "But it was never meant to activate naturally. You shouldn't have been able to wake me." Another explosion rocked the chamber, closer this time. Dust rained from ancient ceiling panels. "The prison systems you mentioned," Eric said, checking his scanner, "they're what's going to seal off Earth?" "Yes, my awakening triggered a cascade failure in the containment protocols. In 3 days, a temporal barrier will envelope this planet." Her skin darkened with what he was beginning to recognize as distress. "Earth's infrastructure can't handle that kind of strain. The barrier will crush this world like an egg." The scanner picked up multiple signals converging on their position. Verton wasn't coming alone this time. "So we find a way to stop it," Eric said, already plotting routes through the metro system. "It's not that simple. The failsafe was designed to be irreversible. Even I can't—" She broke off, eyes widening. "Unless what? Your pure code, combined with my knowledge of the systems." Hope flickered across her features. "We might be able to reprogram the entire network." A mechanical whir filled the chamber as chronosphere drones began filtering through the debris. Verton's voice boomed through hidden speakers. "Did you tell him yet, Ilarian? About the millions you sacrificed? About how your noble act of treason destroyed everything it touched?" Pain flashed across Ilarian's face, but she squared her shoulders. "There's no time. We need to reach the control nexus beneath the old city. It's our only chance." Eric made his decision. "Then we better run." He grabbed her hand, pulling her toward a maintenance tunnel. "There's a shortcut through the old nuclear cooling systems. The radiation keeps most scavengers out. The radiation won't stop Verton's drones." "No," Eric grinned, "but the electromagnetic interference will scramble their tracking systems." They sprinted into the tunnel as the first time bubbles splashed against the walls behind them. Eric's radiation counter screamed warnings, but he'd long since learned to ignore its more hysterical predictions. "You're either brilliant or insane," Ilarian said as they ran. "Why not both?" A ghost of a smile crossed her lips, then vanished as the tunnel ahead lit up with an otherworldly glow. A time bubble had carved through the ceiling, and through it stepped Verton himself. "Enough games!" the executioner growled. "Accept your sentence, Ilarian, or watch another world burn because of your choices." Eric raised his salvage plasma rifle, but Ilarian put a hand on his arm. Her skin was practically glowing now, patterns swirling like storm clouds. "You're right, Verton," she said. "I made a choice. I chose to expose the truth about what the Council was doing to innocent people. I chose to stop them from harvesting souls for their temporal experiments." Her voice hardened. "And I would choose it again." She pressed something into Eric's hand, a small device thrumming with energy. "Run," she whispered. "Find the nexus. I'll hold him off." "I'm not leaving you. You have to." Her galaxy eyes met his. "Pure code or not, you're not ready to face him. Not yet." She smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "Besides, how else will you learn if I was lying about everything?" Before Eric could respond, She shoved him backward through a maintenance hatch, sealing it behind him. The last thing he saw was her skin blazing with blue fire as she faced down Verton. Eric ran through the radioactive tunnels, the device in his hand pulsing like a heartbeat. Behind him, the sounds of battle shook the earth itself. The weight of everything he'd learned pressed down on him, along with questions he couldn't begin to answer. Earth was a prison. Humanity descended from exiles. And now their world's sentence was about to become its execution, unless he could find a way to stop it. All he had to do was trust an alien prisoner, avoid an otherworldly executioner, and possibly rewrite the laws of reality itself. Just another day in the wasteland, he muttered, and pressed deeper into the dark. Eric's lungs burned as he navigated the labyrinth of radioactive tunnels. The device Alarian had given him pulsed faster, its alien warmth seeping through his protective gloves. Behind him, the sounds of battle had faded, replaced by an eerie silence that worried him more than the explosions. He paused at an intersection, checking his wrist computer's map overlay. The tunnels branched in 3 directions, each disappearing into darkness. His radiation counter's display flickered between readings, the needle swinging wildly. "Come on, El," he muttered. "Where are you?" As if in answer, the device in his hand suddenly flared with brilliant blue light. A holographic display erupted from its surface, showing symbols similar to those on the sarcophagus. They shifted and rearranged themselves before his eyes, eventually forming into recognizable text: Nexus, coordinates encoded. Follow resonance pattern. The device vibrated, pulling him toward the rightmost tunnel like a compass needle seeking north. Eric hesitated only a moment before following its guidance. He'd already trusted one impossible thing today. What was one more? The tunnel sloped downward, taking him deeper than his maps had ever shown. The radiation readings dropped to nearly normal levels, replaced by different energy signatures his sensors couldn't identify. The walls changed too, transitioning from crude human construction to something more deliberate. "This wasn't built by us," he whispered, running his hand along surfaces that seemed to ripple under his touch. The walls were covered in the same shifting symbols he'd seen before, but these were dormant, their luminescence long faded. A familiar voice echoed through the tunnel. "They're beautiful, aren't they?" Eric spun around, plasma rifle raised, to find Alarian stepping out of the shadows. Her skin bore new patterns, battle scars, he realized. But she moved with the same fluid grace. "You're alive." The relief in his voice surprised even him. "But Verton will recover, unfortunately." She grimaced, touching a particularly dark patch on her arm. "Timekeepers are difficult to kill. It's rather an occupational necessity." "How did you find me?" She raised an eyebrow, galaxy eyes twinkling. "You're not the only one who can track pure code signatures. Besides," her lips curved into a smile, "you're heading exactly where we need to go." Eric lowered his rifle but didn't relax completely. "And where exactly is that?" "The heart of the prison." Alarian moved past him, her fingers trailing along the symbols. Where she touched, they flickered briefly to life. "One of many control centers the Kaltaria built to maintain Earth's containment. If we're going to stop the failsafe, we need what's inside." "And what's stopping Verton from following us right to it?" "The tunnels themselves." She gestured at their surroundings. "They're chrono-shielded. Even his drones can't track through these walls. It's why the pure code beacon I gave you was necessary. These passages actively resist navigation by anyone not keyed to their systems." Eric studied her as she worked, noting how her movement seemed more careful than before. "You're hurt worse than you're letting on. Timekeeper biology is resilient." She waved off his concern, but he caught her slight wince. "We should keep moving. Verton may not be able to track us directly, but He's not stupid. He'll figure out where we're heading eventually. They pressed deeper into the ancient complex, the beacon's pulse growing stronger. Eric found himself watching Alarion more than their surroundings, questions burning in his mind. Earlier, he said carefully, Verton mentioned something about millions sacrificed. What did he mean? Alarion's steps faltered almost imperceptibly. He meant that choices have consequences, sometimes terrible ones. That's not an answer. She stopped, turning to face him. In the dim light, her galaxy eyes seemed to hold entire universes of pain. No, it's not. But the full answer will have to wait. We have more immediate problems. As if on cue, the tunnel ahead lit up with a sudden surge of energy. Symbols that had been dormant for millennia blazed to life, creating a cascading wave of light that raced away from them in both directions. That's not good, is it? Eric asked, already knowing the answer. The failsafe is accelerating. Alarion's skin pulsed with urgent patterns. We have less time than I thought. The barrier is already beginning to form in the upper atmosphere. Define less time, Eric said, breaking into a run alongside her. Instead of 72 hours, Alarion's voice was tight. Perhaps 30. The systems are adapting faster than anticipated. They recognize me as an escaped prisoner and are responding accordingly. They reached a massive circular door covered in concentric rings of glowing symbols. Alarion pressed her palm to its center, but nothing happened. Damn, she muttered. The security protocols have evolved. They've locked me out completely. Eric stepped forward, studying the patterns. They seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, but underneath the chaos, he could almost sense a rhythm. What about my pure code? It's risky, Alarion warned. Without proper training, interfacing with Kaltarian systems can overwhelm human consciousness. Your mind could burn out. Better than watching Earth get crushed. Eric pressed his hand to the door before she could stop him. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming, like plunging into an ocean of raw information. Symbols and codes flooded his mind, threatening to drown him in their complexity. He felt his knees buckle, but Alarion caught him, her touch anchoring him to reality. Focus, she commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. Don't try to understand it all. Look for patterns, rhythms, like music. Eric forced himself to breathe, to stop fighting against the data stream. Gradually, the flood of information began to organize itself. The door's security system wasn't just a lock. It was alive in its way, and it was curious about him. That's it, Alarion whispered. Her hands on his shoulders steadied him as she pressed close behind him. Show it you belong here. The pure code in his cells responded to her words, resonating with the door's frequencies. With a sound like a massive bell being struck, the circles began to rotate. The door opened to reveal a vast chamber beyond. Eric stumbled backward, his head spinning. Alarion supported him as the connection broke. That was intense. You did well. Was that pride in her voice? Most humans would have been reduced to drooling vegetables by that level of data exposure. Thanks, I think. He straightened, taking in the chamber before them. What is this place? The space was enormous, stretching up and down farther than he could see. Bridges of light connected floating platforms at various levels, and at the center, a massive column of energy pulsed with the same rhythm as his pure code beacon. This is a nexus node, Alarion explained, one of the computational centers that maintains Earth's prison systems. From here, we might be able to... A deep tremor cut her off, shaking loose debris from far above. Eric's wrist computer blared warnings about atmospheric disturbances. The barrier is forming faster than I feared. Alarion rushed to one of the floating platforms. It responded to her presence, glowing brighter. We need to begin your training immediately. Training? Now? Unless you want that door experience multiplied by 1,000 when we try to access the main systems. She gestured for him to join her on the platform. The pure code gives you the potential to interface with our technology, but without control, you'll burn out before we can stop the failsafe. Eric stepped onto the platform, trying not to think about the endless drop below. And you can teach me that control in less than 30 hours. I can teach you enough to survive it. A hint of her earlier smile returned. Probably. The platform detached from its dock, floating out into the vast space. Others moved to join it, forming a complex three-dimensional pattern around them. "First lesson," Alarian said, her skin beginning to glow with concentrated energy. "You need to understand what the pure code really is. It's not just a key or a genetic marker. It's a bridge between what humanity is and what it could become." She raised her hands, and the platforms around them erupted with holographic displays, living mathematics that made Eric's head hurt to look at. "Remember the door," she continued. "How did it feel when you stopped fighting the data flow? Like I could understand its language. Not the symbols, but the meaning behind them." "Exactly. The pure code allows you to process information the way we do, not as discrete data points, but as unified fields of meaning." Her galaxy eyes fixed on his. "Now, let's see how far we can push that ability before Verton figures out where we are." Another tremor shook the chamber, stronger this time. Somewhere far above, the sky was beginning to tear itself apart. Eric took a deep breath and opened his mind to Alarian's teachings. Earth's future, and perhaps its past, depended on what he could learn in the next few hours. "Ready when you are," he said. Alarian's answering smile was both beautiful and terrifying. "We'll see about that." Hours blurred together as Alarian pushed Eric's abilities to their limits. Each lesson built on the last, teaching him to navigate the complex web of Caltarian systems without losing himself in their vastness. "Your civilization," Eric managed between exercises, his mind aching from the strain. "It seems like you could do anything. Why need a prison planet at all?" A shadow crossed Alarian's face. She turned away, her skin darkening with what he now recognized as shame. "Power," she said finally, "has a way of corrupting even the most advanced societies." The platform beneath them shifted, carrying them higher in the chamber. Above, through gaps in the ancient structure, Eric caught glimpses of a sky turning strange colors as the barrier began to form. "The Council," Alarian continued, "discovered that consciousness itself could be harvested as an energy source. Human souls, they found, were particularly compatible with their needs." Eric's stomach turned. "What do you mean, harvested?" "They called it resource extraction. Clean, clinical terms for something monstrous." Her galaxy eyes fixed on a point in the distance. "They used human souls to power their civilization, first criminals, then anyone they deemed expendable. I helped build those systems, believing their lies. When I learned the truth, I destroyed it all, no matter the cost." Another tremor shook the chamber, stronger than before. Eric steadied himself against a floating console, his pure code automatically interfacing with its systems. Data streamed through his mind, including fragments of historical records that made his blood run cold. "You tried to stop them," he realized. "I did more than try." Ilarian's skin rippled with conflicting patterns. "I disabled the security protocols that allowed them to harvest subjects, destroyed the extraction facilities, released proof of what they'd been doing to the public." A single tear traced down her cheek, glowing like liquid starlight. "I thought I could save everyone. But the systems were integrated into everything. When I shut them down, it triggered a cascade failure. Entire cities lost power. Life support systems failed. Temporal shields collapsed." Her voice broke. including the ones protecting Verton's family. The pieces clicked into place. That's why he hunts you. His wife, his children, along with millions of others. She met his gaze. I chose to sacrifice the few to save the many, to end a system that would have eventually consumed billions of human lives. But for Verton, I'm simply the monster who murdered his family. Eric processed this, remembering the rage in the executioner's voice. And now he wants to finish what the council started. No, Ilarion shook her head. He wants to erase it all. Use the failsafe to destroy Earth and everyone on it. In his mind, it's justice, wiping out both the resources and the one who failed to protect his loved ones. Another violent tremor racked the chamber. Warning signals flashed across multiple displays. The barrier is accelerating again, Ilarion said, pushing aside her painful memories. Show me what you've learned. Access the temporal core and initiate a diagnostic sequence. Eric closed his eyes, letting his pure code connect with the systems around them. As he worked, he couldn't help but wonder how many more secrets were buried in Earth's past, and would understanding them be enough to save its future? The chamber's warnings reached a fever pitch as Eric dove deeper into the systems. Each connection was easier now, his pure code adapting to the alien architecture. But something felt wrong, like static building before a storm. Ilarion, he called out, these readings. A massive explosion rocked the chamber. Through the debris cloud emerged Verton, his armor crackling with temporal energy. A squad of chronosphere drones flanked him, their weapons trained on the platform. Did you tell him everything, Ilarion? Verton's voice boomed through the space. About how you watched the cities burn? How you justified each death as necessary? I made a choice, Ilarion shot back, positioning herself between Eric and the executioner. The same choice you refused to make when you learned the truth about the harvesting. I chose loyalty. You chose willful ignorance. Eric's connection to the system suddenly spiked. Through the pure code, he sensed something massive shifting in the chamber's architecture. We need to move, now. He grabbed Ilarion and leaped to an adjacent platform just as a temporal burst obliterated their previous position. The drones spread out, herding them toward the chamber's center. The barrier is nearly complete, Verton announced, satisfaction evident in his tone. Soon, Earth will be sealed away forever, along with all evidence of Kalteria's greatest shame. There are 15 billion people on this planet, Ilarion protested. Innocent lives. Like my children were innocent? Verton raised his arm, weapon ports opening across his armor. The council was right about one thing. Humans are nothing but resources, and soon they'll be expended. Eric's mind raced. Through his connection to the systems, he could feel the barrier's power building. But there was something else, a weakness in the chamber's defenses, a back door Ilarion had built into her own systems. He whispered, the maintenance protocols. You left yourself a way in. Her eyes widened in understanding. It would take too much power to activate. The energy drain would kill anyone connected to it. Eric gave her a grim smile. Good thing I'm just a resource. Before she could stop him, Eric plunged his consciousness fully into the chamber's systems. The pure code in his cells sang as he accessed protocols hidden so deep even Verton hadn't found them. Power surged through him, burning like fire in his veins. No! Verton fired, but his temporal burst scattered harmlessly against the energy field now surrounding Eric. Warning klaxons blared as the chamber recognized the override sequence. Eric felt his body beginning to fail under the strain, but he pushed harder. Through the pain, he glimpsed fragments of Earth's true history, the creation of the prison, the countless lives sacrificed, and the moment Ilarion chose to burn it all down rather than let it continue. Eric, stop. Alarian's voice seemed to come from very far away. It'll kill you. Maybe, he managed through gritted teeth, but at least I'll die human. The chamber erupted with blinding light as Eric triggered the final sequence. The last thing he saw before consciousness fled was Verton's armor failing, Ilarion reaching for him with terror in her galaxy eyes, and through it all, a glimpse of hope for Earth's future. Then darkness claimed him, and Eric Marlowe Scavenger, prisoner's descendant and perhaps humanity's last chance, fell into the void between moments. Consciousness returned to Eric like waves lapping at a distant shore. First came sensation, the burn of pure code still racing through his cells, the cold metal beneath his body, the taste of copper in his mouth. Then sound, alarms still blaring, but muted now, as if heard through water. Finally, sight, his eyes opening to find galaxy eyes staring back at him. "You absolute fool," Ilarion whispered, cradling his head in her lap. Her skin pulsed with patterns he'd never seen before, relief mixed with something deeper. "You could have died. Did it work?" His voice was raw as if he'd been screaming. "See for yourself." Eric pushed himself up, Ilarion supporting him as the world spun back into focus. The chamber was in ruins, floating platforms crashed or hanging askew. But through the gaps in the ancient structure, he could see the sky, normal, purple-tinged, but no longer tearing itself apart. "The barrier?" "Temporarily halted," she confirmed. "Your override bought us time, but—" A grinding sound interrupted her as one of the fallen platforms shifted. Verton emerged from beneath it, his armor damaged but still functioning. The chronosphere drones lay scattered and broken around him. "Time," he spat, stumbling to his feet, "is something we've run out of." He raised his arm, revealing a device integrated into his armor that Eric hadn't noticed before. "Did you think I came unprepared?" Ilarion's skin went almost white with shock. "That's a temporal core. You can't—" "Can't what? Use the same technology you corrupted to finish what I started." Verton's helmet retracted, revealing a face scarred by temporal energy. "You're not the only one who can rewrite systems, Timekeeper." The device began to pulse with familiar energy, the same patterns Eric had sensed in the barrier, but concentrated, focused. Through his pure code connection, he felt reality itself beginning to bend. "He's creating a singularity," Ilarion said, her voice tight. "If it grows, it won't just destroy Earth, it'll erase us all." Eric tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. The earlier override had taken too much out of him. "How do we stop it?" "We don't." Verton's laugh was hollow. "That's the beauty of temporal erasure. It's already happened, is happening, will always have happened." Energy crackled around them as the device powered up. Eric felt time itself beginning to splinter, possibilities multiplying and collapsing with every second. Through his pure code, he glimpsed fragments of other timelines. Earth as a paradise, Earth as a wasteland, Earth having never existed at all. "There has to be a way," he muttered, forcing himself to focus through the cascade of possibilities. "The maintenance protocols are burned out," she finished. "You saw to that." But something in her voice made him look closer. Her skin was pulsing with a pattern he'd seen before, when she was planning something desperate. "Whatever you're thinking," he started. "I caused this," she cut him off. "When I tried to save humanity, I didn't just kill Verton's family. I set all of this in motion." She touched his face gently. "But you showed me something I'd forgotten. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best one." Before Eric could react, Ilarion launched herself at Verton. The executioner, focused on his device, didn't see her coming until it was too late. They crashed together in a blur of blue light and damaged armor, rolling toward the chamber's edge. "Stop!" Verton commanded. but there was fear in his voice now. "The temporal core is unstable." "Good," Alarian grunted, wrestling with him. "Eric, the pure code. You can redirect the energy, just like the barrier." Eric understood what she was asking, but the cost. "It'll kill you both." "Better than letting him win." Her galaxy eyes met his one last time. "Sometimes the hardest choice is the right one." Eric forced himself to his feet, fighting through the exhaustion. The temporal core's energy was building to critical levels, reality flickering around them like a faulty hologram. Through his pure code connection, he could sense the device's architecture, similar to the chamber's systems, but twisted, corrupted. "Verton," he called out. "You want to know why Alarian really shut down the harvesting program? Show him, El. Show him what you showed me." Understanding flashed across Alarian's face. She grabbed Verton's helmet, her fingers finding the neural interface ports. Blue light flared between them as she forced a connection, flooding the executioner's mind with her memories. Verton screamed, not in rage this time, but in horror. Eric saw what he was seeing, the truth about the harvesting program, the millions of conscious souls being burned as fuel, the Council's plans to expand their operations across multiple worlds. And through it all, Ilarian's desperate choice, the weight of sacrificing thousands to save billions. The temporal core pulsed erratically, responding to its master's distress. Eric seized his chance, plunging his consciousness into the device's systems. Eric's mind connected to the core like lightning striking a network. It hurt, but this time he was ready. "You're not the only one who can rewrite history," he gasped, "but I'm doing it to learn, not destroy." The core's energy began to shift, redirecting away from temporal erasure into something new. Reality stabilized, but with a difference. The chamber was changing, transforming as centuries of dust and decay stripped away to reveal its original glory. "What are you doing?" Alarian called out, still restraining Verton. "Making a choice." Eric's body felt like it was burning from the inside out, but he pushed harder. "You showed me that sometimes we have to break things to fix them. Well, I'm breaking time itself." The chamber erupted with light as the temporal core reached its peak. Eric felt himself being torn apart at the atomic level, his consciousness scattered across 1,000 possible timelines. He saw Earth's past, present, and future all at once, the truth of its creation, the weight of its purpose, and the potential of its people. And through it all, he held on to one thought. There had to be a way to save everyone, even those who thought they were beyond saving. "Hold on," he shouted, though he wasn't sure anyone could hear him anymore. "This is going to get interesting." The world went white as time itself bent to his will. Eric's consciousness snapped back into his body like a rubber band. He found himself standing in the chamber, but it was different, pristine, gleaming with the full glory of Kaltarian architecture. The temporal core hummed quietly in its proper housing, no longer a weapon but a tool. And before him stood both Alarian and Verton, frozen in a moment between moments. "What you've done," Alarian breathed, her skin rippling with astonishment. "It should be impossible." "The pure code," Eric explained, though his voice shook with exhaustion. "It doesn't just let us interface with your technology, it lets us improve it." Verton staggered back, his armor's systems recalibrating to the altered timeline. "The memories, my family, are alive," Eric confirmed. "Look." He gestured to one of the chamber's floating displays. It showed a timeline, not the one they'd come from, but one where Ilarian sabotage had been more surgical, more precise. One where the harvesting program had still been exposed and stopped, but without the cascading failures that had claimed so many lives. "How?" Verton demanded. Because I used your temporal core to do what neither of you could, learn from both versions of history. Eric stepped forward, though his legs threatened to give out. The pure code doesn't just let me read your systems. It lets me understand them, improve them, and right now, it's holding open a window between what was and what could be. Alarian moved to support him as he swayed. The energy cost is killing me, yes. Eric managed a weak smile. But this time, I'm not doing it alone. The choice is yours, both of you. We can let this timeline solidify, one where the truth was revealed without the devastating cost, or we can go back to our original path. Verton looked between the display showing his living family and his temporal core, now integrated safely into the chamber's systems. My wife, my children, will grow up in a universe where the harvesting was stopped before it could claim millions more victims, Alarian said softly. But only if you help us maintain this new timeline. The executioner's helmet retracted fully, revealing tears on his scarred face. The energy requirements. Even with the pure code, it's too much for one person to bear. Then it's a good thing, Eric grunted through clenched teeth, that there are 3 of us. 3 temporal anchors, Alarian said, her galaxy eyes widening. It could work. She moved to one side of the chamber while Verton, after a moment's hesitation, took his position on the other. Eric stood at the center, the pure code in his cells resonating with the temporal core's energy. The timeline isn't stable yet, Eric explained, feeling reality shift around them. But if we can split the load, channel the energy through all 3 of us, we can make it permanent, Verton finished. His armor systems began interfacing with the chamber's architecture. My family lives, humanity survives, and the truth about the harvesting still comes to light. Everyone wins, Eric managed through gritted teeth. Novel concept, isn't it? Alarian's skin blazed with patterns of determination as she connected to the systems. Ready when you are. Eric closed his eyes, letting the pure code guide him. The temporal energy flowed through him like a river of fire, but this time he wasn't fighting it alone. He felt Alarian's presence on one side, precise, controlled, directing the flow with millennia of experience. On the other, Verton's power joined them, his executioner's training providing the strength they needed to hold the timeline in place. Reality buckled and warped around them. Through the chamber's displays, they watched history rewrite itself. The harvesting program's exposure, the evacuation of the threatened cities, the preservation of countless lives, including Verton's family. But more than that, they saw the future changing too. Earth was no longer just a prison planet. With the truth revealed, the barriers between human and Kaltarian began to fade. Technology and knowledge flowed freely between the civilizations. The wasteland Eric had grown up in transformed into something new, not quite human, not quite alien, but a blend of both. It's working, Alarian gasped. The timeline is stabilizing. But the power requirements, Verton warned. We can't maintain this forever. We don't have to, Eric said. Just long enough for... The chamber filled with blinding light as the temporal core reached its peak. Eric felt himself being torn apart and reassembled, his consciousness expanding to encompass multiple timelines at once. Through it all, he held on to the connections with Alarian and Verton, their combined strength keeping him anchored to reality. Then, with a sound like the universe taking a deep breath, everything changed. When Eric opened his eyes, he was standing in a garden. Not the blasted wasteland he'd known all his life, but a true garden, filled with plants that were both familiar and alien. The sky above was still purple-tinged, but now it shimmered with the ethereal beauty of merged technologies, human ingenuity combined with Kaltarian mastery. "Welcome back," Alarian's voice came from behind him. He turned to find her sitting on a bench made of living crystal, her blue skin glowing softly in the evening light. "You were lost in the memories again." "Hard not to be," he said, joining her. "Sometimes I still can't believe it worked." 5 years had passed since that moment in the chamber. 5 years since 3 people had chosen to rewrite history rather than be bound by it. The world around them was proof of their success. Earth had become a beacon of cooperation between civilizations, a symbol of what could be achieved when ancient wounds were allowed to heal. "Verton's daughter graduated from the Temporal Academy yesterday," Alarian mentioned, her fingers intertwining with his. Eric smiled. "And how did the old executioner take that?" "Better than you'd expect, though he did threaten to temporal lock her in her room if she tries any unauthorized experiments." They shared a laugh, remembering how far they'd all come. The pure code that had once marked humans as prisoners now served as a bridge between species. Earth's prison systems had been transformed into universities, research centers, places of learning and growth. "Any regrets?" Eric asked, watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. Alarian's galaxy eyes met his, swirling with the same mysteries that had captivated him in that ancient sarcophagus. "Only that it took us so long to figure out the truth, that sometimes the greatest prison is the one we build in our own minds." Pretty philosophical for someone who once called humans barely evolved primates. "Well," she grinned, her skin pulsing with patterns of joy, "I married one of those primates, didn't I?" As if to prove her point, she pulled him into a kiss that still felt like touching starlight. Above them, ships from a dozen worlds crossed the evening sky, their contrails weaving patterns that looked almost like the symbols that had started it all. Earth was no longer a prison or a wasteland or even just a planet. It had become something more, a testament to the fact that the future is never fixed, that wounds can heal, and that love, in all its forms, has the power to rewrite history itself. Eric and Alarian broke their kiss but stayed close, watching their world continue to evolve. The pure code hummed contentedly in his cells, no longer a mark of imprisonment but a symbol of unity. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new discoveries, new chances to bridge the gap between what was and what could be. But for now, in this garden grown from the ashes of ancient conflicts, they had found something better than revenge or redemption. They had found home. The end.